All right, what's good, family? Hope you're doing well. Happy Memorial Day. Thank you to all of our veterans. Thank you for all those active service members that are out there right now protecting our freedoms, protecting our liberties. It is 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on this lovely Memorial Day. I was about to say weekend, but it's the actual Memorial Day. I want y'all to come on into the room because on every Monday, 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, it is time for the MMR, the Monday Message Recall. This is the opportunity we come together to recap the sermon that was delivered this past Sunday at the Southside Church of Christ, 800 Elmira Avenue in Durham, North Carolina, 27707. You're welcome to join us anytime online or on premise. Hey, but look, we want to let you know, hey, we're about to shift. Somebody put it in the chat, shift. We're going to shift at the end of June. On June 30th, we are shifting. It won't be 10:30. It will be 9:30 a.m. will be the worship time. So if you know your friends, if you inviting your guests, if you're inviting friends and family to attend, look on the 30th, June 30th. 9:30, because you might have your feelings hurt. You come at 10:30 and you'd have missed most of the service, but we want you to be able to continue to follow us online and also in person. I'm John Merrill, the online minister for the Southside Everywhere campus, and we want to welcome you to this conversation. So go ahead and break out your notes. Go ahead and get the text out. Go ahead and share this with your friends and family on YouTube, because we know they were preparing for Memorial Day. They was getting all the food together. They was getting the coals and the lighter fluid and getting the meats. And somebody forgot to get the sides, or somebody forgot to have the condiments and the paper plates and the cups. So they was going out running all those things. And now they need a good word to go along with that good physical food that y'all sitting back and eating and that y'all enjoying at this time. So go ahead and come on into the room. And I am joined here by my lovely wife.
Well, hello and happy holiday to you, Nikki. We see you inside of the chat. Thank you so much for being here. Come on inside of the StreamYard room. It is the MMR. It's the Monday Message Recall. And for those of you who took copious notes yesterday, go ahead and drop the title in the chat. Hey, Yvette, how are you? Go ahead, put it inside the chat. Put it inside the chat. What was our topic on yesterday? What was the scripture on yesterday? Go ahead and put that in there. Well, while John, go ahead and pull that up. I believe scripture came from Second Timothy, chapter 1, verses, no, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Good evening, Sister Bert. Thank you so much for putting that in there. Thank you so much for putting that inside of the chat. All right. So, John, we're ready. You know what you do. Right now, we start off with the script. So he about to give us the script, and then we're going to get into this conversation.
All right. So I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 6 through verse 7. This is why I reminded you to fan the flames, the spiritual gift God gave you when I laid my hands on you. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. And your version might say a sound mind.
All right, y'all. Y'all got that script? Y'all got it? Y'all ready for this conversation? Okay, John. So it was a dynamic message on yesterday. If you missed it, you need to go back and grab it. You could go to the Southside Church of Christ Facebook page or YouTube page and grab Facing Your Fears, 2 Timothy verses 1, chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Okay, John. So how did Brother Thomas start this conversation on yesterday?
Well, Brother Thomas started this conversation by addressing the stigma and the misconception of fear. And sometimes as Christians, we think that we shouldn't have any fear. We think that fear should not exist in our lives. Fear should not be an emotion that we experience. Everybody tells us don't worry and don't be afraid, to be of good courage. But you wouldn't know what courage was. You wouldn't know how to be strong. You wouldn't know how to be of good cheer if you didn't also know and experience worry and fear and concern in our lives. And so Brother Thomas wanted to make it clear that it's not that we don't have fear, it's that we know how to put fear in its proper place. It's not that we're not ever going to be afraid. It's not that we're not going to come upon some challenges. He says that fear is an emotion. It's a sensory emotion that alerts us to know that there's some danger up ahead. Now, you have to understand how difficult or how short life would be if we didn't understand that there were some dangers up ahead, that it was some precautions that we had to take, that we had to be prepared for some certain battles. You see, it would be a terrible thing not to have fear of a hot stove, not to have fear of a hot pot, not to have fear to not stick the fork into the electrical outlet. It would be a whole lot of short lives around here if we didn't have a natural understanding and did not understand what fear was. And so now, but we have to understand that it's a response that God has put inside of us to respond to certain situations, but it is not our home base. It is not where we operate from. God did not give us a spirit that works in fear, that operates with the mindset of fear, that always submits and allows our life to be driven by fear. And he says, we have to understand that it's a system that's built to keep us away from certain situations, certain possibilities, but it's built overall to protect us. But there are areas in our lives that should not be affected and hindered by fear. And what he was getting at is that when we start to operate in our calling, when we start operating in our God-given purpose, God gave us purpose. God didn't give us fear to not operate in the purpose. And so later on in the conversation, he says we have to understand, if God didn't give us the spirit of fear when it comes to operating in our purpose and in our calling, then where is that spirit coming from? We got to realize that spirit is opposition, that spirit is enmity, and that spirit is an enemy. There's a whole lot of people that are sitting on their gift and ability because they are afraid, not of what may happen, but mostly because of what people may say. And so here he took it as a launching point to go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and introduce us to where Timothy was first mentioned, and said that Paul makes this and uses this to show that says, hey, he was aware of Timothy's timidity and his fearful expectation that he was intimidated by people. And we talked about that on the morning sip this morning, why Timothy was deterred by people. But he said he had to get Timothy to a level where he could operate highly in leadership and operate highly in his purpose. And so he knew what Timothy was facing, but he also knew more so the gift that Timothy was called to operate in. And so he wanted to make sure that Timothy was operating according to his gift and not according to his fear.
So he also stated that Timothy was actually understood to be the person that was going to hold the line. Put it in the chat. Hold the line. Put it in the chat. Timothy, hold the line. Nakia, hold the line. Sister Bert, hold the line. Yvette, hold the line. And this is when you are super clear that God has called you to do something tremendous, magnificent, extraordinary. And yeah, there may be fear. Yeah, there may be uncertainty. Yeah, there may be a lack of confidence, but you are the one. Put it in the chat. I'm the one. I'm the one. Put it in the chat. I'm the one. Take ownership of what it is that God has put in your hand, that you're the person to hold the line, that you're the person to take it to the next level, that you're the person to take that thing to the next step. And in order for you to be able to do that, you got to have confidence. You got to be motivated. You got to have that support. And he stated in these scriptures where Paul started, he started to give Timothy a lot of confidence, a lot of words of confidence, assuring him again of everything that God had placed in him, of everything that his mom had placed in him, his grandmother had placed in him. Like, this was an opportunity for him to be built up and not torn down, because you do get that life and death is in the power of the tongue. You either lifting people up or you tearing them down. It's no in the middle of the road. So all your conversations that you had today, think about it. When you were talking to people, were you building them up or you were tearing them down? Did you motivate them to go after what it was that God had called them to do? Or did you deter them with fear and uncertainty? Or because you have it, taking the necessary action that you were supposed to take in order to move the thing forward that God has given to your hands. But we got to learn how to hold the line. We got to learn how to be confident enough to say that I'm the one. And in these scriptures, he was showing how he was motivating, uplifting, encouraging Timothy to give him the confidence to know that he was in fact the one. So God has promised us a lot of things, but in order for us to be able to achieve these things, sometimes we're going to have to face opposition. We're going to have to face fear in the face in order for us to take hold of what God has given us, just like the children of Israel in the promised land. Okay, so John, listen, how we're going to go now further into these steps in this conversation that Brother Thomas put on the table for us yesterday.
Yeah, so Brother Thomas only hit us with two. He only hit us with 2 main points yesterday. So I think what he's going to do is he's going to pocket that one and carry it forward for one lesson when he got to give us 4 instead of the 3. So, you know, he then gave us some grace, but we're going to have to go ahead and let him have that mercy when he goes ahead and gives us 4 points on one of the upcoming lessons. But here's what he said. He says the first thing when you want to face your fear, he said you have to clarify your calling. And that means that you have to be crystal clear on what God is calling you to do. Because like Denise said, clarity breeds confidence and confidence brings competence, and they all go into a loop together and feed off of each other. And so if you want to face your fear appropriately, you must, number one, have confidence in God, that God knows what he's doing when he chose you to carry the treasure that he put inside of you, that you would have the ability to carry it out. And he said, he went on and he quoted several great people, but he says one was Rosa Parks, and she said one of the things that she had learned over the years, that once one person has their mind made up, it removes fear. That once you are clear, the urgency of what you have to perform will override fear. It doesn't mean that fear will not be present. It just overrides it. I've read somewhere where he had put all things under his feet and gave him to be the head over all things to the church. Sometimes for us to be able to put fear under our feet, we got to focus on the calling and the mission at hand. Do you not understand that Jesus was afraid of the cross, that Jesus did not want to have to face the cross, but he says your will is more important than me submitting myself to the fear that I had to go through and the pain that I'm going to go through. We are not facing something as treacherous as the cross, but we still have to get over the fear of what we think is going to cause us pain. And we can only do that by trusting what Jesus has put inside of us and what God has trusted into our care. And so Ralph Waldo Emerson was someone else that he quoted as well. He says, when we do things that we fear, then the death of fear or the funeral of fear is certain. We put an end to fear once we start doing the things that we're afraid of. Y'all know how it is. You know, sometimes we go ahead and when we go into a fearful situation, we dread it until we actually do it. And then once we do it, we learn, oh, that actually wasn't so bad, or that didn't last as long as I thought it was going to be. So we have to go ahead. Sometimes one of the best things I heard is sometimes Les Brown said, if you're going to do it scared. Because it's in the doing that the confidence comes. And it's in the doing where your help comes. It's in the doing when you start leaning on the calling that God puts the strength inside of you to do what he's actually called you to do. And so that's why he encouraged Timothy. He's like, stir up the gift, stir up the flames, start with the spark. As long as you got a spark, there's opportunity. As long as you have opportunity, there's a chance for you to be able to do what God is calling you to do. And you know how many things have caught fire just from a spark, just from a simple flame. They tell you when you go out into the woods, you know, put out your fire completely. Don't let anything still burn. Don't let it flicker. Don't let it crackle. Why? Because in your absence, a fire can still take place. I want you to know, as long as you still got that desire, as long as you still have that urgency, as as long as you can see that God is still calling you to do it, then there is a chance that it will catch fire and it will complete the mission. You just got to flame it. You got to put that, and I'm going to let Deneen talk about this. I see her nodding her head. I know she want to get up in there, but talk about, that any fire needs fuel to burn. And it's not just the wood, it's the air that it needs. And so where are they going to get this air needed to fuel the fire to burn and stir up the gift that's inside of them?
Well, he said that if we allow and invite God into the situations of our life and allow him to breathe on some things. Now, I'm telling you, now, wait a minute. Now, I've seen the breath of God build and destroy. See, I'm a little hesitant for some of his breathing because I get it. But he was talking about God's spirit breathing into a situation and allowing him to be invited in. So many of us go through so many situations in life where our fire or our spirit has been quenched or someone has discouraged us. I was finishing up a book that I've been reading over and over again and listening to over and over again called Chop Wood and Carry Water. And he talked about inside of this, one of the greatest evil is discouragement. And discouragement allows you to not move forward on things that you know could be beneficial for you. And that's what happens. Sometimes we allow certain people in our circle and around us, they quench the spirit, they quench our fire, they put it out. But if we allow God and ask God to come back into a situation that we have allowed, or him to breathe on a fire that we have allowed to be put out, that we can stir up that gift that God has given to us to follow the calling that he has placed in our life. So sometimes we just got to invite God in and allow him to breathe on the things in our life so that the fire, that the breath, that the air can continue to burn. All right, John. So he only gave us 2 points on yesterday. What was the second point that Brother Thomas talked about?
The second point that he said is that we have to counter the culture, and we have to operate with the understanding everybody's not going to like what you do. You got to understand that you are not for everybody. But the people that you are for, that's who you're seeking. That's who you're reaching out for. That's who you're here to serve. And so we have to operate with this, that and he came back to the point. He said that God did not give us the spirit of fear. And he says the spirit of fear, the word fear in the New Testament in the Greek is dalia, and it means to retreat from the fight. God did not equip you to run from the fight that he's causing you to stand your ground on. That's why the armor of God does nothing to protect your back, because you're not supposed to turn your back to the fight. You're supposed to engage in the fight. And so we have to understand, just because people don't like the way that we do it, just because people may know of a better way and they don't like our way, we know the way that God is leading us to instruct it. So that's what we're obedient to. That's what we're doing when we're serving. And he says we have to understand that people, when we start to share our ideas and start speaking, people will naturally rise up and speak against. Everybody's got something to be critical about. Everybody can find fault in what you're doing, but that's when we choose faith over fault. Because if you stop what you're doing because of what somebody points out, then you'll never get it done. Because people are excellent at finding the fault in what you're trying to do, but they do not have the vision to see that you're walking in faith, because the vision is given to you, and that's what you have to operate in. So go ahead and say, don't pay on no mind. Go ahead and put it in the chat. Don't pay on no mind. When somebody tells you that you can't do it, don't pay on no mind. If it's if you know that God has called you and God is leading you, now that's the key thing. Some of us are calling, some people, we out here doing some things that God ain't called us to do. Now, if God ain't called you to do it, now you might need to go ahead and sit down and let it go. Now go ahead and find what God is calling you to do. Have that conversation. And then also he said we have to understand that spirit does not come from God. That spirit of fear does not come from God, that it comes from people. And the devil like to get into some people. And so we got to realize that some of these people are acting as agents of the devil, but don't pay attention to the agents. You got to pay attention to the advocates. You got to pay attention to the Pauls in your life, to the people that see your gift, to the people that go before you, as we talked about this morning, the people that go before you and tell people like, look, I'm sending somebody here to help you out. And when you send them, you better receive them and receive them the right way, because they're serving the Lord just like I'm serving the Lord. They come to benefit you just like I benefit you. And you got to go ahead and treat them the right way, because if you don't treat them the right way, you're not just going to have to deal with me, but you're going to have to deal with Almighty God, because God doesn't like it when you mess with somebody that's operating in the anointing of their calling and you try to defuse them and derail them. And so we have to understand that just because they're not pleased, it doesn't give us space to pull back. We got to keep on somehow pressing forward. And then Deneen, what I liked about it was he broke down the spirit. He broke down that what God has given us, because we talked about what God did not give us, but he talked about what God gave us. And I think that's how he sort of rounded this thing out a little bit. And so we want to go ahead and talk to that. Oh, I forgot. I got to talk about this. He talked about how people's opinions can be a snare to us. And that sometimes the people's opinions, if you go over to Proverbs 29 and verse 25, they can hold us back from operating in our calling. But he says that God gave us power to break the snares and the traps that people set before us, so that we could continue to operate in our calling. And so that's where he's told us what God has given us. And then I'm going to pitch it to you to go ahead and tell them what God has given us as a promise in this fight over fear.
Well, God told us, walking into our purpose, answering the calling that he has placed in our life, if we walk within his power, right? God-given power, because he started talking about God's power, and that God has given us a power, y'all. And he's given us this power to be able to walk in what it is that he has called us to do. And we shouldn't be afraid, and we shouldn't be uneasy. He said too, that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power. And he also said sound mind, a sound mind. He has saved our minds. So all this worry, all this upset, all this concern is not of God. It's not of him. And if you feel that when you're moving and walking in purpose, just know that you're not relying on that power that God has given you, and you are not actually relying on how God has already saved your mind. So this worry and this concern and this uncertainty that's starting to take over, you got to let it go. Put it in the chat. I got to let it go. And he also said that God has given us a spirit of love. That relationship that we have with God is not based on what we have done, but based on that we have been called and accepted and loved and placed into his family. And when he went back and broke down some more about power, he talked about dunamis. Dunamis is the Greek word for power. He said we are dynamite, we are dynamic, and we are used to implode and explode situations to go further than we ever have before, to go ahead and walk in the power that God had graced us with and has given us. Like, we should be the people that walk into the room and people can tell that something has changed just because of our very presence, because we are there in the space. We cannot be afraid to say yes. We cannot be afraid to say who we are. We cannot be afraid to take on the challenge that God has given us. We cannot be afraid to take on the calling that God has given us. We need to be people who actually raise their hand and say, Father, here I am, send who? Send me. Father, here I am, send me. Put it in the chat. So while we are going forward, while we are answering calling, while we are looking at the things that God has placed before us, he said, remember, God tells us that he will what? Never leave us or forsake us, that he will never put us in a situation that he has not already given us a way to triumph over. Just like we are not placed in challenges and situations without having a way to escape. He don't put us in situations where we can't win. We are in situations where we can win. Yes, sometimes we may lose some of the fights, but we're going to win the war. We're going to win the overall battle. So that's all right. Just dust yourself off. That's right. Be the dynamite when you walk in. Make sure you continue to hold on to those things that God has given us, because he has given us power. He has given us love, and he has given us a sound mind. He said he had to back into those things. He was going backwards into it. So listen, you guys, that is the message. He also left us with a story about him actually being afraid, going to sleep. And he said, I remember when the thunderstorms would come, and I would be in the room with my mom, and it would be dark, and I would get up and find my mom's room. I would walk through the dark, through her room. I would knock on her door. I would lay on her floor, and I could find sound sleep. I could be peacefully asleep because I knew that she would be there to protect me, to make sure that things don't go wrong. And that's how we should feel when we are in the power, in the arms, in the space of God, that no matter what situation we find ourselves in, we should always be able to have sound sleep, because we know the Father is at the wheel. He's watching over us. He's keeping us. He's given us the power that we need to move forward and to go hold the line for whatever it is that he has placed in our hands. All right. So that's it for me, John. Anything else you want to say before we go?
Yeah, I just want to encourage our friends, our family, our brothers and sisters out there. You are dynamite. You are dynamite. That means you're explosive. Do not be afraid to blow something up. Sometimes you got to blow it up so you can clear it away and build what God is asking you to build. So some of these things, some of these relationships, we need to blow it up. Some of these institutions we need to blow up. Now I ain't telling y'all to go out there and blow up anything physically. Y'all know what I mean. We're using this in context, but we got to go ahead and tear down some of these thoughts and some of these belief systems so that God can establish a kingdom mindset and kingdom territory so that we can build the kingdom of Christ the way that he wants it to be built. And so that's it on today. Look, like I said, we look forward to seeing y'all on next Sunday. Remember, June 30th, 9:30 start, both online and on premise. So be there at 9:30. Don't come. Hey, you can still come at 10:30, but just don't be surprised when you miss a lot of the service. So come and be there at 9:30. Looking forward to seeing you. Tell your friends, share this out as well. We got the YouTube link if you want to go back and get the whole sermon. So I appreciate you, Sister Yvette. You knew what I mean. I had to clarify because stuff goes viral too fast, and they be saying, Brother Meriwether told us to do this. Don't put my name on it. I did not give you permission to do that. And so look, go check out the sermon, share it with friends and family. You know what time it is. It's 7:28. So we got 2 minutes extra so that when we run over next time, we're going to use this 2 minutes back. But we're about to go up here and get some of these burgers and wings that we done put on the grill and get this nourishment that we got. So everybody take care, be safe, God bless, and we'll see you at the next appointed time.